welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Good afternoon, my friends. I'm Bernard McAuley. I'm from the rainy Pacific Northwest, and boy, is it raining and the wind is blowing. It's a good day to sit in front of the fireplace, a little bit of music, a glass of wine, and read my books. One of them is The Shadows of Sawtooth Ridge, and the other one, which we're kind of talking about, or talking more this time, is Beyond the Shadows of Sawtooth Ridge, Joni's story. I'm really proud of it. Proud of both books, really. It's stories about that begin back after Joni's father, which is Larry Becker here, returns from Vietnam after 4 years as a prisoner of war, only to find out that his wife had just passed away a few months prior of cancer. And he has 2 children, returns to Montana and a family ranch he ends up buying, and taking his 2 children back with him, and ending up meeting an old girlfriend from, really not a girlfriend, but a friend that he competed with through high school rodeo, college rodeo days. And she's now a reporter, and he flies for an airline besides ranching. So it's quite a little bit of history there. It's not my history, it's a fiction history. And for some of you who may not believe this, since I'm writing these books and a lot of it has to do with Montana, this picture here, if I can get it out there, is of myself and my horse. It's our covered arena here in Olympia, and her name is Can't Be Fancy. She's a quarter horse. One below it is my fly fishing experiences, some of them. This one is in Montana on Bitterroot River in western Montana. Beautiful area. It's one of the most beautiful areas around. And I told you, I was talking a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, I guess it was, of one other person that's been very much involved in kind of my grandfather, for instance. He's the one on the right there, and my grandmother there. He used to tell me a lot of stories and of people surrounding the area where he was. He moved out. He left Iowa back in when he was 3rd grade. Never had an education beyond the 3rd grade, and managed to put together a 14,000 acre cattle ranch in eastern Montana. And fortunately, my older brother and myself was a big part of that for many years, and we really enjoyed ourselves. We look back at it kind of as a hard work time, but feeding the calves at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning at 20 below zero before we ever headed off to school. A couple other things we did was help them hay and so forth. And it was we look back on it as a great experience. Probably experience to help me when I went to work for Northwest Airlines later years after our ranch was sold. This is another place where I kind of put a lot of my stories together. This is my earlier time. This is Glacier National Park. It's crown jewel of the park system, the national park system, we call it. That area there, that trail is going up to Granite Park Chalet. Excuse me, Granite, going up to Glacier, Canal Glacier it is. I've looked at pictures of Canal Glacier since then. They have a cam up there, and it's not as large as it was in those days. It's kind of riding horses. I've did the Bob Marsh Wilderness in Montana several times. I've fished along the ridge of the Sawtooth Ridge. I've fished along there. I've hunted behind there to into the Bob Marsh Wilderness. It's a real place. The ranch isn't real. The people are not real, but they're life experiences from myself. And there's quite a few questions that people have asked me yesterday, and I kind of like to go back on a couple of those questions. Even though you may not be writing as much as you'd like to or thinking, but I found out that my grandmother, who refused to really tell anybody about her history, but her sister did, and I was able to keep a lot of history from her. My Aunt Tiny, my grandfather, I managed to keep some history through him. But even if you're writing for your own family, it's really something. It's leave your family some history of yourself in the back. And our writing club right now is working with several people in our senior community who wanted to leave something for their grandchildren. And it's very important to leave that so they can pick it up down the road their ways. And you may not even think it's important, or my life isn't important. Your life is important, and it means so much. The history is something that we should leave everybody. And for some of you who need a little bit of encouragement, my first book, I guess some of you know that I had dyslexia. And my first book, which is The Shadow of Sawtooth Ridge, I was not impressed with my grammar. And believe it or not, that was recommended for a Hallmark movie. So I'm hoping that somebody or the Hallmark picks it up and goes from there. So it's give it a chance, give it a try. And Reader's Magnet has been super. They've been getting me out there like I should be. I attended the book fair down at Tucson, Arizona this last March. And it was fun. Not only the book fair, but there was probably 500 authors there from throughout the United States. And it was fun hearing about their experiences and seeing how they're putting their books out there and how they're doing movies and so forth. Some of the books. One gentleman I talked to in the restaurant one night at Congress Hotel was from Idaho, was doing fly fishing books, and it was being picked up as fly fishing movies quite along the way. And he was just filling me in on some of the stuff that he was doing. And there was another lady who I sat next to, and we signed books together. Her and her family did quite a bit of sailing, and one of the places they went to was Mascar, if I'm pronouncing that right. Was the family travels to Mascar, and I had her sign one for my grandson, who's 10 years old, and he's enjoyed the books tremendously. She's I, I never really imagined he's kind of got the sailing bug. He gets out there in his old water board. He paddles away on the Puget Sound, and that's where we live. Is on the Puget Sound now. It's quite a little trip from eastern Montana, the prairies, the sagebrush, the rattlesnakes, the cold winters of 20, 30, 40 below zero, and cattle ranch to eastern Montana, to from eastern Montana to western Washington. I've traveled and spent time in Asia, Hawaii, and other places throughout the world. In fact, with Northwest Airlines, and I've enjoyed it. It's a lot of work, a lot of experiences along the way. And I did know at one time I was able to speak Japanese. I was able to speak Spanish and French, and had my beginnings in Latin. And thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. It's nice to hear from you again. It really is. I've learned 3, 4, 5 different languages, and I think I've forgotten about most of them because I haven't used them for about 20 years now, or not quite 20 years, 15 years. So there's a lot of stories out there. I've had my stories kind of combine my ranching experience with my airline experience and some of my military experience. I began writing back in high school, and I was kind of disappointed and kind of discouraged by a high school teacher that felt that when she saw my it was Voice of America, I believe, or some sort of a contest, and she called me up into her office one day and she said, "Bernie," she says, "I can't accept this because it looks like your mother wrote it." And I was so disappointed at that particular time. And then a few years later, I was in the service and ended up in a hospital out here, the Army hospital out here in Washington, and 5 months of doing exactly nothing. Uh, they kind of tried to keep you working, but I spent a lot of time in the library writing about my grandfather's time, the day he passed away, and my experience of returning to the ranch that had been sold a few years earlier, and traveling in different places and remembering the different homesteads he used to talk about, the different families. And it brought back good memories. And after he had left the ranch and I graduated from high school, him and I took a little trip out here to Washington. We pulled into a gas station. In those days, the gas station person would come out and fill you a tank. And he come back into after filling our tank, he came back into his station and he says, "Is that Barney Clausen out there?" And I said, "Yeah, that's Barney Clausen." I said, "My God, I haven't seen him since I was in the 3rd grade when my family left during the Depression, came out here to Washington." I said, "Wow." My grandfather was really just a surprise to see him. And these were stories this is one family he's told me stories of. And it was fun. It was enjoyable. It was history. So again, I encourage you to go write, even if it's about your family. Sit down and write. Some of you have been working, spent your time with people, working with people. I spent 38 years working with people, and my last 15 years I spent working at a with the school district. And I love my students. We don't have very many grandchildren. We only have a couple, but it was fun. Some of those students now return and see me and stop in and knock on the door and say, "Hey, can we come in?" And yeah, come on in. And I've got doctors, attorneys, engineers, so many people that graduated and went on someplace, experiences also. One young lady stopped me on the school bus one day and she said, "I bet you don't know who I am." And I says, "Yeah, I know who you are." Her name was Cindy, and she had graduated from college and was now teaching. I had her own teaching position in Idaho. So it's these are stories you can write. These are stories you can write about. Just think back to some of the stories that are out there. And they don't have to be true. They can be fiction. Just think of some of your experiences. My experiences along the shadows of the Sawtooth Ridge with a gentleman by the name of Ron George. And unfortunately, the Agent Orange finally got to him some 30 years later. And he was buried up there in a place called Shoto, Montana. And I said earlier, I returned to his gravesite, and I looked down and I looked up. And I looked at him and I says, "Oh, damn." He says, "You're facing the eastern side of the Rockies." He loved the Rockies, and he kind of gave me spent a lot of time. Him and I spent a lot of time up there fishing and hunting and team roping, which some people have asked me, what is team roping? It's basically two ropers on horses and one steer. One does the heading and the other does the steer, does the legs and the rear legs. And it was used in earlier days. They did for doctoring cattle. That's how they doctored cattle, is team roping together and doing it out in the range. You see just one person roping. A steer just doesn't stay down that long when just one person is doing it. It stays down long enough when two people are doing it. And it's a cowboy life is a good life. I keep saying I've had the greatest life of all. I worked on a ranch for all my up until I was 18 years old. I went in the service. It wasn't that great an experience there. I think that was about the only one I had that wasn't. But it was experiences along the way. Working for an airline, it was probably the greatest experience I ever had. Great people to work with. And it kind of brought into my second book, which is Beyond the Shadows of Sawtooth Ridge. Because when I first started with the airlines, there was no women. All the women were kept to office positions, or let's put it this way: office position or reservations. When you called, you didn't talk to a man very often. You talked to a woman. And back in probably about 1983, 84, women were just starting to become into our field, into the airline field altogether. Not only in the office, but at the ticket counter, in operations, on the ramp, loading and unloading bags. And we finally started seeing women in the cockpit. And it was fun. The first woman I think I've heard mentioned before was worked for Frontier Airlines, hired the first woman. And she was a pilot. Her boss was chief pilot, and she had taught him how to fly. And he used to tell me, he said, "Boy," he says, "it's amazing." He says, "I'm trying to teach her how to fly, and she knows all about it." So it was kind of fun. Next one was I remember a woman in the cockpit was Western Airlines. I was coming from Asia, and I was taking via Los Angeles because I had worked the Super Bowl, and I was taking a trip returning back to Seattle, and this person kept giving weather and everything on the loudspeaker. And when we landed in Portland, here comes a woman out of the cockpit. And believe it or not, her dad or her father was one of the top cowboy TV stars that I remember. I can't even remember his name now, but that was her dad. And women started coming about. And this second book is about a woman. It's one of the first women that, it's fiction, of course, but it's one of the first women that entered Annapolis. West Point was just starting to have women at that particular time. She was discouraged to go to flight school. They felt that she was better equipped to be on the ground someplace in an office, but she didn't want to have anything to do with it. Neither did her girlfriend, who her background comes from her parents being military. And they both kind of together. They were accepted in the flight school down in Florida. Again, they ended up over in flight school in Texas. And it's their time going through flight school. It's their time uh, among men and being accepted among men. And after she had graduated from flight school and received her wings of gold, she ended up being invited to her LSO, which is lead training officer, home one evening for dinner. And he had just started training with her before, after the first year after she returned from home at Christmas time. But he had just started training with her, and he was so impressed by her that after she had again made her final aircraft landing, he invited her over for dinner one evening. And when she knocked at the door or rang a doorbell, two young ladies opened the door and welcomed her into their home. And it was her lead officer introduced her to his children and his wife. And he says, "You're probably wondering why I invited you over here this evening for dinner." And she said, "Well, a little bit." So, "Well, I have two daughters, and I wanted my daughters to know that there is no limit to what they can do. And you are an example. You are setting an example for them. And I'm very proud of you. I want my daughters to go far. And my wife, I wanted her to meet you just to see what a woman out into the world." And apparently she was trying to do her own thing too, and being very successful lady also. But it's those days, women are just starting to be. Joni goes on to become a pilot for the Prowler up here in Woodby Island Air Station. She ends up because they would not allow, during Desert Storm, they would not allow women into the combat zone. She ends up learning how to fly another airplane within a few weeks, called the P-3A, which is a spy airplane. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it. And I see you just hopping into a different live booth, but yours I'm into. So thank you very much, Justin. You have a good day and enjoy your time. I appreciate it. I hope you get some good experiences along the way visiting all of us today. It's authors. I wasn't planning on being one, but it's a good thing in life. My wife has Alzheimer's, so it just gives me time when I'm at home. I'm not much of a television watcher, so writing books I enjoy. And again, getting back to Joni here, she goes on to fly. P-3A was basically used for submarine searching, but it was also used along our coast and in the Caribbean as chasing drug traffickers. And over there in Desert Storm, it was used for gathering information on different things that was going on and forwarding that information to the command center in Florida. One of the things that happened, they also used that same P-3A for destroying ships. And it was a very valuable aircraft, especially when Iraq was trying to move their ships off to another port and protect them. And it was the P-3As that did most of the damage to those ships before they were able to complete their journey. She ends up returning and then to the Woodby Island, but there's also this getting not only into returning to the island and so forth. She does uh, ends up fighting in another war later on over there in the Middle East, and going and leading a group over there in the Middle East. Her along the way, she ends up meeting her friend of her dad's, who's an airline pilot, and unbeknownst to her, and her father didn't want to tell her because there was between the two of them, they were overheard that she doesn't date the officers, and he asked her on their way to their Christmas leave. He was going home to his folks in Montana. She was going home to her folks, and they just happened to be sitting next door to each other. Which is, Eva Cooper, I think I'm not that. Even though I do have my license, I've flown a jet at one time earlier, quite a few years earlier. It was a Learjet. So I started out in one Cessna 140, learning how to fly. I believe a fighter, a good. I believe a commercial airline is probably if you're flying a 747, it's probably the easier of the two. You have a point A and a point B, where a fighter jet, you may have point A to point B, but you're also having to maneuver to, if you're in a war, you're having to learn how to maneuver a whole different way and a whole different light. And one of the things I learned while I was researching some of these things was that even though if you know the Blue Angels, for instance, that go around to the different shows, and we have them here in Washington every summer. And I understood that most of the Navy pilots, doing my research, they do most of those maneuvers in flight school and after flight school. These are the fighter pilots, the F-18 pilots, so forth. And these maneuvers are hard. I wouldn't even attempt it. One thing that the commercial airplane has is the GPS. One of the things that we found out later on in life when the 747 came online, at one of our checkpoints up in Alaska, we were 40 miles off with the old airplanes, the 707s and so forth. So I love airplanes. I love the flight. I love the airlines. And in my earlier days, out on the ranch in eastern Montana, we used to look up at the skies, and you see those contrails flying across the sky. You wonder, where are they going? Man, where are they going? You question yourself all the time. God, I would like to be on one of those contrails. I'd like to be on one of those airplanes. Well, I found out where they were going, and I found out what they were doing, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So I've had some good jobs, all the way from being a young man on the farm in Montana to Northwest Airlines to the Goodford School District. They've all been good jobs, dream jobs that I've never thought I'd ever have. And I've been able to be working with people. I was administrative supervisor when I retired here in Seattle. So it was fun. It was fun working with people, fun working reunions. And we had a lot of things that was going on at the time. 911 was one of the things that we had going on. I've had experiences with the first bomb threat for money in Great Falls, Montana. And I've handled bomb threats here in Seattle with the FBI looking over my shoulder. So it's all experience. It's really a different life. It's things that go on that you don't know when you check in for that ticket counter and you get on that airplane and you wonder, oh man, this is great. But boy, this seat is really crowded. And it's a fun life. It really is. And now that I'm sitting back and I'm remembering some of those stories and being able to write about some of those stories, that even makes it better. It gives me something to do and gives me something to look back on. like my grandfather, who probably couldn't write that well, and with his third grade education, I have a little bit more education than he did. I hope I did anyhow. And I've been able to put these books together and maybe leave them for my children later on down the road. And oh, I wonder if my dad actually did that. So it's fun. It's fun. The whole thing is fun. I think it's getting close to time probably that I may have to go, but I want to enjoy it. Thanks for your one or two questions this afternoon. I appreciate it. Hope I didn't bore you too much. It's a good life, and sit back and read. Read a book and sit back and write. Leave something for your children. Don't just disappear off the face of the earth, and leave a little bit of history. Leave something that your children will look back on someday and say, oh, that's my grandmother did that, or that's my dad did that. In this case, I hope my dad did that. So again, I want to say thank you to all of you. I think it's about time. I'm not certain, but I just had the feeling I don't really see anything in life around me that says, it's time to go, Bernie. But see you later. Take care. And don't do anything I wouldn't want to do. Hope it isn't raining in your country. It is raining here. And I'm ready for the sun. So again, have a good day.